Certainly Hebrews 11 lists the great heroes of the faith, but you cannot tell all their stories, so they're summed up in a few verses of God's faithfulness. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Friday. There is a short list of famous heroes that are recorded with their acts of obedience that were spurred on by their tremendous faith in God. People like Noah, Abraham, and Moses. Then there are those great stories of faith that are not retold, but they're mentioned in a few verses with the great works of God that are listed in a brief way. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 32, it says, "And what more shall I say? For the time should fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens, and women received their dead raised to life again." These are reminders that God has done a whole host of things for his people, and he has used great men and women to display his faithfulness to his people. He mentions famous judges like Gideon and Samson who have a reputation for pulling off miraculous deeds and victories through the supernatural work of God in their lives. And then he mentions his servants like David and Samuel who led the people to follow after God. You can read their stories in the Old Testament, of course, about subduing kingdoms with God's miraculous intervention or stopping the mouths of lions as he did for faithful Daniel, his servant. As you read these verses from Hebrews chapter 11, you can recall some of the miraculous works of God in Israel's history where they escaped the edge of the sword. This reminds me of so many victories, but especially of defeating Pharaoh's army in the midst of the Red Sea. Now, some of the records are of God enabling his people to stand in the face of the enemy. It says, out of weakness, they were made strong. It reminds me of that young teenage boy named David who came and stood against the giant Goliath because he trusted in God to win the battle for his people. They did become valiant in battle, as Gideon's little army of 300 who overcame that great host of Midianites in their battle. And women received their dead raised to life again, as in Elijah and Elisha's ministries where they brought back their children. Well, these are all great stories, but the common theme is that these people placed their complete trust in God and he rewarded their faith. Are we trusting in God for the miraculous today? The extraordinary, the beyond human explanation? Because he is still the same almighty sovereign that is in complete control in our world today. So rather than living in fear and worrying about the future, let's place our trust in God. Not that we're going to be listed in this chapter, but God's faithfulness will reward our faith.